our first.
We are now
Recording
live.
in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the March 11th, 2024 City Council Work Session. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And I thank you all for joining us. And with that, I call this work session to order. And I am going to turn it over to the Assistant City Manager, who is stepping in because our City Manager has COVID. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I'm Matt Rodriguez, Assistant City Manager. I'm excited to hand this presentation over to Ian Penn, our Sustainability Manager, and Danielle Klinkabeel, who's on the team as well as an analyst, to talk about the CAP 2.0 implementation plan progress update. So I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager, and good evening, Mayor and Council. As Matt had said, I am Ian Penn, Sustainability Manager, and I'm pleased to be joined this evening by Danielle Klinkabeel, who is the Climate Policy Analyst for the city. So we're really excited to be here tonight, really to provide an update on progress on CAP 2.0 and just a quick overview of what we'll be covering. We're going to kick things off with an overview of our climate goals. We track progress against these goals using a variety of tools, including a greenhouse gas inventory and the dashboard, which is really a snapshot of actions from CAP 2.0 that provides key details from that document. We will next share some progress on implementing CAP 2.0. And then finally, we're going to touch on some of the areas that staff have been working on to support our climate action work with CAP 2.0 and even beyond that as well. So to begin, we really wanted to start at the community level with a brief overview of our CRO goals, and then share some data from our most recent greenhouse gas inventory, which covers calendar year 2021. The 2021 inventory is actually included as attachment C in your AIS. We conduct these inventories every 2 years. So the 2023 inventory is something that we'll get going this summer, and we'll at the end of this year for the 2023 year. So just a quick refresher on the Climate Recovery Ordinance. The CRO really outlines 4 goals. 2 focus on the community. The first is to reduce fossil fuel use by 50% below 2010 levels by 2030. Second, what is effectively a 7.6% annual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And then there are 2 goals that target city operations. So there's a similar goal to have a 50% reduction in fossil fuel use, and then for the city to be carbon neutral by 2030. And just to clarify, moving forward, all the data that I'm going to be presenting in the next couple of slides basically uses 2010 as the baseline year for comparison. So everything is against 2010 as a basis of comparison. So how are we doing on our goals? The chart you have in front of you really shows our progress in reducing fossil fuel as a community. We've made headway. There's been a 14% reduction, but more work is clearly needed to actually reach our 2030 goal at this point. I think on a positive note, when we account for population growth, per capita fossil fuel use has actually declined by 24% since 2010. So we're seeing a divergence of population and energy use, which is actually a good trend with the community. Shifting gears a little bit from fossil fuel use, this in front of you is actually a breakdown of community greenhouse gas emissions by sector. Overall, emissions have decreased by about 10%. Similar to what we saw with fossil fuels, emissions per capita have also decreased by about 20%. So again, what this means is we're not just reducing our overall footprints, but we're also emitting less per person. This trend that you're seeing, this emission reduction trend, has been driven largely in part to reductions in building emissions. I think it's important to acknowledge, though, that a factor in this decrease was the closure of 2 industrial facilities during 2020. We recognize, as we view this through a triple bottom line lens, that this is not how we want to be achieving our goals, but this is part of the story in terms of how some of these emission trends have been showing up to date. Transportation, again, remains the largest source of emissions for the city. However, there was progress there too. Transportation-related emissions actually dropped by around 7% since 2010, so that's been a positive trend as well, but it still dominates our emissions profile. I also want to just highlight or point out that these sectors that you see in front of you actually directly align with different focus areas that are identified in the CAP. So this is a graphic that I think will be familiar if you haven't seen it in a while. We call these sectors buckets because they really serve as key areas within CAP 2.0. and where we are really focusing a lot of our emission reducing efforts across the community. Through actions that exist within these specific buckets, CAP 2.0 is really a way to ensure that there's a comprehensive approach to emissions reductions all across the community. And I wanted to really just reintroduce the bucket concept because what Danielle is going to be explaining are all the specific actions that actually exist in these different areas. And then before I hand things over to Danielle, I just wanted to provide a little bit of data on city operations. Within operations, we're also making progress against our CRO goals. We've cut fossil fuel use by about 25% since 2010. This has actually allowed us to meet an interim benchmark of a 25% reduction by 2020. So we're on track with that goal. A lot of this is due to two things. One is a switch from fossil diesel to renewable diesel within our vehicle fleets. And the other was really just getting off the steam for the downtown plant, which is like 10 years ago when we got off that. And that's really been driving the emissions reductions to this point. The city has also been carbon neutral since 2020. We do this right now, basically through purchasing carbon offsets through the Oregon Climate Trust. And so with that, I'm going to hand things over to Danielle to talk about CAP 2.0 implementation and some of the stories that we want to share with council about CAP progress.
Thank you, Ian. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'd like to start by providing a high-level overview of our progress thus far. The implementation plan, which was attachment A in your AIS, provides a status update on each of the CAP 2.0 actions. Each action has been determined to be either not yet started, in progress, or completed, and you can see a breakdown of those numbers here. I'd like to spend just a little more time explaining the in progress category, which is the blue section, since that represents the lion's share of our actions. So this really comes down to the difference between a project and a program. Of those 88 actions that were considered in progress, 29 are considered in progress but have a designated end date. 51 of those that are in progress are programs or operational practices that have in fact been fully implemented, but will continue to be adjusted on an ongoing basis. So we actually have more like 70 actions or 61% of our CAP 2.0 that is implemented. That's great news. I'd like to now share some of the stories and actions that help to demonstrate our progress in each of the different buckets that Ian mentioned. So reducing emissions from transportation is one of the largest focuses of CAP 2.0. The largest steps forward have been the continued investment in programs and infrastructure that support active transportation, like bicycle and pedestrian and bus facilities. The city is working on completing 261 infrastructure projects as outlined in the transportation system plan. Many ongoing and future projects have been made possible by the recently voter approved 2022 street bond. The city and our government partners have taken large steps to convert our internal vehicle fleets to electric vehicles and to renewable diesel, or R99. As Ian mentioned earlier, this switch to R99 has resulted in a 15% decrease in emissions in city operations. This is a really big success story for the city and our region. Some data that we have helps to show that our investments are having the intended result of reducing gas usage. While the impact is small, we are seeing measurable progress. In the chart on the left, you can see that there has been about a 4% decrease in total diesel and gas sales. There was a sharp decline in 2020 due to the pandemic, and while there has been a rebound in sales since then, it is still 5% below pre-pandemic levels, so that's good news. More good news is that we are seeing a huge increase in purchases of electric vehicles. One way that the city plans to continue to encourage this is by installing more publicly accessible EV chargers. We also know that not everyone can afford an electric vehicle. One interesting program that EWEB has set up is an EV car share pilot program, and that's had a lot of success at an affordable housing complex. They're looking to expand this program into the future. The next large bucket of greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. A landmark investment at the state level was the passage of the climate resilience package in 2023. This suite of bills created a statewide building performance standard, new incentives for heat pumps, and other programs. This bill is in addition to the Inflation Reduction Act. which better positions the city to leverage both state and federal funding and regulations so that we can meet our climate goals. The city is taking big steps to make energy efficiency improvements in city-owned buildings and facilities, such as by installing heat pumps and fuel switching. Many of our climate collaborative partners are making similar investments to improve energy efficiency in their facilities. One really exciting story is the completion of a biogas purification facility at our wastewater treatment plant. This facility is allowing us to produce renewable natural gas and truly demonstrates our community's leadership on adopting cutting-edge climate solutions. In looking at the data on buildings, the takeaway is this. Our greenhouse gas emissions have decreased by 10%, even though our population increased by 12% in that same time period. That's good news. Our community's commitment to energy conservation is a big reason for this. As demonstrated by the chart on the left, electricity use has remained relatively flat even as the local population has grown. This is in part due to EWEB's ability to meet load growth through incentives for energy conservation rather than acquiring new energy resources. Energy Trust of Oregon, or ETO, has also been successful in incentivizing Northwest Natural's customers to do energy efficiency projects that have led them to use gas more efficiently. The chart at the top shows that most of the gas savings have come from commercial and industrial projects, represented by the blue and orange bars. The next large bucket of greenhouse gases come from fugitive emissions. These are largely emissions that result from waste and things called refrigerants. Lane County is the lead on managing waste and recycling for our region, and for over a decade, they've achieved the highest recovery rate in the state. According to the data in the chart on the left, we are seeing an overall increase in the amount of waste generated, but the percentage that gets recovered has hovered at around 50%. Again, that's good news. The bad news is that the amount of waste generated per person shot up by 10% between 2020 and 2021. Much of this increase was actually driven by additional waste from structures that were destroyed in the Holiday Farm fire that ended up in the landfill. One big success story here is that in 2019, only 11 4J schools were, only 11 4J schools had composting, but as of 2024, it's been implemented at all 33 schools. The city will continue to prioritize targeting large food waste generators with our programs. And the city has made big efforts to reduce waste by promoting reuse. We regularly host fix-it fairs to help consumers repair goods so they don't have to purchase new goods. These events have been extremely successful at targeting populations that can generally be hard to reach, including youth and the Latinx community. What's coming next on the waste prevention front is going to increase what can be diverted from the landfill. The new statewide Recycling Modernization Act will expand the list of items that are eligible for recycling. Lane County's recently approved IMRF, or Integrated Materials Recovery Facility, will also contribute to better diversion by using cutting-edge technology to better be able to sort out recyclables and organics. It will also include an anaerobic digestion facility that can produce renewable natural gas. I'd like to turn my attention to the other large focus of the climate action plan, which is resilience. The city continues to focus on increasing our urban tree canopy, which faces many competing factors like disease, storms, and private development. However, we are making good progress with continued investments in new tree plantings and better maintenance of existing trees with a strong focus on equity. The voter-approved 2022 street bond established an additional $2 million for street trees, which is another great step in the right direction. Protecting our water supply is critical for resilience. As of September 2023, we have 5 operational sites for emergency water stations in the region, which was the goal established in CAP 2.0. EWEB and our wastewater facility have programs and partnerships set up with landowners and land managers in the Mackenzie watershed to restore shade sites along the river and protect our water supply. And finally, we know that wildfires have become an increasing threat to our community. The city and partners collaborate extensively to mitigate and prepare for wildfires that threaten urban regions. This work includes detailed fuels assessments, ongoing fuels reduction work and prescribed burns, updating evacuation routes, and education on preparedness. A lot of this work is funded through large federal grants. So there are a few major takeaways to summarize what I've shared and our priorities going forward. The first is that while progress has been small, it is measurable and shows that we are trending in the right direction. Second, our commitment to climate action is shown by the breadth of actions being undertaken across our whole organization and across our whole community. This leadership from the city, our climate collaborative partners, and our business community is helping us to take those steps in the right direction. And finally, even though we have made progress, there's still a lot to do. This work will take continued investment, and we can only be successful if our solutions address the equity, environmental, and economic impacts of our decisions. I'd like to now pass it back to Ian to cover all the other things we are doing to support our climate work.
So thank you, Danielle. And just to wrap up, I'd like to provide just kind of a high level overview of some of the additional efforts that staff have been undertaking to support both CAP 2.0 and a lot of our climate efforts kind of beyond that as well. And so really one is really focusing on grants and funding. We continue to track and pursue federal and state climate funding opportunities. We've been successful in securing grants for things like building efficiency upgrades, for example, energy efficiency and community block grants, which we'll be using on city facilities for energy efficiency and fuel switching. We also were awarded a DOE grants in partnership with Earth Advantage and some other Oregon cities that will focus on building efficiencies. However, I think it's important to acknowledge that all of these funding opportunities are competitive, and we've experienced that competitiveness in a grant application, for example, for EV charging infrastructure that was done in partnership with the county and eWeb that we are unfortunately not successful on. But we continue to sort of refine our strategies and find ways to try and maximize our competitiveness so that we continue to sort of go after and identify some of these funding opportunities. On regulatory and program monitoring, we're closely monitoring the development of climate-related regulations and programs at the state and federal level. This ranges from tracking states' development of a home energy rebate program that's under development right now to things like new appliance efficiency standards that are being developed at the federal level and how that could impact us and ways that we can take advantage of that in helping to meet some of our climate goals. I think one of the things I wanted to talk about was sort of just the power of partnerships. And I think one of the things that we've really learned in the current moment of investment in climate is that partnerships and coordination is really important. In fact, a lot of agencies require this in their grant making. They want you to be coordinating and collaborating with people on things. And so we continue to really focus on these partnerships and really ways to try and position ourselves through partnership to put together stronger grant applications. So that's been a big focus as well. Those conversations occur at multiple levels, locally, at the state level, nationally as well. Want to talk a little bit about engagement. So currently, we're undertaking a comprehensive community engagement effort that's really focused on building decarbonization. Thus far, staff have been engaging with the business community in recent weeks. The next phase is going to include a number of things, including engagement with disadvantaged communities, engagement with our energy partners in the community, doing things like community events and rolling out a community survey on this. This is something where we're continuing to gather data. We will come back to council sometime later this year to share with what we've learned through this process. And I think the last thing is just the idea of communication really being key. Again, I think one of the things we've learned both through engagement and in some of our partnership discussions is the importance of clear and consistent communication. So really a focus of staff has been in keeping the community informed about our climate goals, our ongoing successes and upcoming initiatives, just as a way to make sure people are aware of all the opportunities, the things that we're doing and what's coming next. So with that, I think I'm going to hand things back to Mayor Vinnis for questions.
Okay, that is great. I have Randy and I have Greg and I have Alan and I have Lindsay and I have Matt. Okay, so far that's the list. So thank you. I just want to say thank you first. And I have Emily. I just want to say before we totally kick it off, how I appreciated this packet and how I, in the nerdy, wonky world that we live in, how I enjoyed reading the matrix of the projects and what they were and where we had made progress. So I really appreciate how much work that was just to sort of update all of that and fill it in. And it was very informative. So with that, I'll let counselors hit it. So I've got Randy first and Greg second.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to both of you for
Mhm.
presenting that information. It's encouraging to see some progress. I always have believed that as we get deeper into this, technology builds on technology, and it's going to be one of these curves that goes like that. But it's good to hear it's working. My first question is pertaining to Lane County Solid Waste and the iMRF program. How are we going to be able to determine what percentage of that is Eugene?
In terms of what is going to be diverted,
Yes, well, as far as, right, diverting, is it a percentage of overall diversion, or how do you?
yes.
What's the
and
metric?
What we've
of
done
it?
historically, so if you look at our inventory and how we account for our contribution of emissions from methane from the landfill,
Right.
we usually do it based on the population that is feeding material into that and what our percentage of that total is. And I don't have that number in front of me, but if it's, if it's 100,000 tons and Eugene has 40% of that population, we attribute to ourselves 40% of that emissions profile.
It'd be interesting to see, where we are now as a baseline and see what that does in the future. I know, I mean, it sounds great. I know some of the haulers are having some anxiety over this. But and I think it's important that we engage all of them, because part of whatever we do, the important piece is people buying in and putting their shoulder towards the work rather than opposing. And if we get their opinions and their feedback, it will help. And that also goes with, I love that you're reaching out to the business and I assume industrial community. I would also encourage you to reach out to organized labor and, especially in the building trades, because they're a part of this and frequently their voice gets overlooked. So I think that would be very, very useful to look at. Street design, what role is street design playing in this? I know we have some big projects ahead. Is that helping, hurting, or staying neutral?
That is probably something I would want to talk to our transportation planners about and get back to you on it. I'm not sure that's an area that is core to what we do as a program. So I don't know if we have a good sense of that. I know that, the transportation system plan is a huge part of this, and how that gets implemented is going to have a really big impact on our transportation emissions. So I think broadly that infrastructure, whether it's active transportation or other things, is going to be key to this. But in terms of specific question on street design, I would probably defer to our staff who are expert in that and get back to you on that information.
I think that would be important to know. It's not just that we know we're doing better, and I don't want made up numbers, but I want credit for what we are doing as we're trying to reach certain benchmarks. Do we have a number for how many street trees we lost during the ice storm?
I think we can get that exact number. If I remember last time I looked at our tracking application, I think it was something around 70. So like that were complete losses. So actually extremely low compared to some of our partners. That doesn't mean that we didn't have much more work to do.
70 trees, not 70%.
No, 70 trees
Okay, thank you.
that we lost.
Well,
sorry about that.
Springfield was 70%.
70 in some areas of the city, they felt that way. Now there was a lot more trimming work. We had, I think, over 1,000 work orders for tree work, but we can get exact numbers for you.
I think that would be interesting to know. And then, is there a plan to replace them? I know we have a street tree planting effort going on. I've been involved in some of that as a volunteer, but I think that's good information to have and try to look at this from all directions.
I actually have the number.
Oh,
So we lost less than 200 trees that were located in the right of way were lost to this storm. That represents, and a little bit broader context than that, only 2% of our urban forest trees were affected and required, a response. So I think it was only about 0.3% were actually lost, like complete failures.
that's helpful. Thank you. I think I was a little higher than 2% in my yard, but it's I realized different areas were hit
Part of
harder
the
than
reason
others.
is our street trees get a lot of maintenance. They're on really tight pruning cycles. And we did notice, our parks versus the street trees faced a little bit higher casualties. And so that just goes to show continued investment in maintaining the trees that we have through pruning cycles, and, you know, all of that makes a big impact.
Thank you.
All set? Okay. Greg and then Alan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. My question is a follow-up to Councilor Groves's question, and that is, as far as the IMRF is concerned, I know the county is making a significant investment in that facility. Two things. One is how long and how much capacity is going to be expanded by investment in that facility in terms of the landfill part of it. And the second thing is the cost to the individual customers that will be, you know, our waste management, our recycling, all of that. Do we have a number or an idea of how much that's going to increase because of this investment? Or because what I have heard through various conversations is that not all of the haulers have been, I think, adequately heard in this conversation, and the cost of investment in this facility is going to be a little bit more than what was originally thought it was going to be when the county engaged the provider that they engaged with.
Sure. So for the first part of the question, what my understanding is from the county is that they think the IMRF could actually extend the life of the landfill by up to 50 years. So it's actually going to create an enormous amount of capacity within the existing landfill. I know that waste prevention staff have been looking at rate impacts of this. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I can get those for you. My understanding is the impact on residential was going to be relatively modest, and there was going to be a larger impact on commercial, but I don't have those exact numbers in front of me.
What do you mean by modest?
In terms of residential?
Yeah.
My understanding was around $1 a month increased rate for residential with a larger number for commercial, but I don't have the exact number, so I wouldn't want to give that, but it was a relatively small number. Yep,
I would
can get that number
appreciate
to you.
it. That would be helpful.
Yeah, the county has a presentation that we could draw from on the project to get more specific numbers for you, Councilor Evans.
That'll be helpful. And what the city's, you know, what's the impact on the city with that?
Okay.
It's our part of it.
Thank you, Alan. And then Lindsay.
Yeah, and if there was I don't know if you know, if there was a greenhouse gas emission reduction comparison between existing plan with the Short Mountain landfill gas to electricity project that EPUD does, which is a big reduction in greenhouse gases compared to this project, and what the net would be comparatively speaking if one were to go versus the other. The other thing about the ice storms is 2021 and 2014, we got hit really, really hard. And I think it took out all of our trees, a lot of the trees that were really weak. And so we didn't have as big a damage. And that didn't happen in Springfield, which is why I think they got nailed this time. Overall, really good presentation. Thank you for all the detail. And this is kind of a tale of good news and bad news. The good news is I really like the fix it, repair things. I think that's going to go a long way. The biodiesel, the energy efficiency, 61% of our projects are basically complete. That's great. I do agree that having that category of in progress is very misleading. The way you did it on the second graph where you have it ongoing, which is much better. I think that's a better way to do it. And more good news, our per capita greenhouse gas emissions are going down. The bad news about that is that's great, but irrelevant, because our greenhouse gas emissions are our total greenhouse gas emissions, not what we do per individual. So our greenhouse gas emissions are based on our total reductions, not on our per capita. We keep growing, we keep adding more emissions. And I think that one of the things that I've seen preliminary numbers. We don't have 2022 numbers and 2023 numbers. We've just got 2021. And I think we saw it's an artificial decline What I've seen in other spaces is that the pandemic rebound made everything go back up in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So I wouldn't bank too much that we're on a trend going down. I think it's actually going up. The graph on page 13, which actually shows greenhouse gas emissions for gas and diesel, is actually the trend that I've seen in 2023 is even higher in terms of going upward from where we are. So might look good now, but I think that was really pandemic induced euphoria about our decline. And I guess the other big thing I wanted to touch on was the transportation emissions are 54% of our emissions. And I just don't think we're doing a lot in that area. And we need to do a lot more in that sector to deal with by far the largest segment of our greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll need another second round.
All right, thank you. All right, Lindsay, then Matt.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ian and Danielle. I want to echo the sentiments about the matrix. It's awesome. Really great to easily see all of that information and the cost and impact. I'm looking at the section on resilience though, and seeing how out of 7 projects that we have not started, 5 of those are in resiliency. And we're obviously all talking a lot about the ice storm and the impacts on our street trees. I'm wondering if you could talk more about energy resiliency and if you've heard or have ideas around a resilience hub. I know the state has issued an RFP for local governments and organizations for developing resilience hubs. I'd be interested in learning more about how we could do that here in Eugene. And really, I'd love to bring it back an entire additional work session on emergency management in general at the city level, not just with our climate action plan goals, but as a larger conversation. So if you could speak to that for a second, and then I have one other item.
Go for it. So on the resilience front, there's a lot there. So I think in focusing on the cap, I think one of the challenges was we were focusing on the things that were identified in the cap. I think a challenge with the cap, it was pre-COVID. And I think a lot of things have changed, priorities have changed. And it's not that we're not focusing on resilience. We're not necessarily focusing on the resilience action items that are in the cap. And so I think that's part of the challenge of the story. And I think it's probably incumbent upon staff to make sure that we're communicating those things. But I think your point is taken. I think on the issue of energy resilience, I think one of the things that has definitely come up in our conversations with the business community is the idea of energy resilience. And so that is front and center for us. It's not necessarily something captured in the cap as written, but it is front and center and something that we're thinking about a lot. And I think is part of this conversation that we're having with the business community on building decarbonization. As we have that. I think with regard to resilience hubs, one of the things I didn't talk about is another one of our partnerships, and this is something being led by Lane County, is we're going after some money from EPA to basically create resilience hubs all across the county. And so, Springfield, Eugene, Veneta, Florence, Oak Ridge, all would potentially have sunny day resilience hubs that would serve the community in addition to providing services during emergencies. And so we're hopeful that we'll be successful in that as a grant application. So yes, the idea of resilience hubs and how those integrate with the rest of our emergency management is a big focus right now, just because that's such, a front of mind topic.
I love that, and I would love to hear more about that if we're kind of in agreement to bring that to another session. I also, as we prepare for our June update on residential building energy, looking at different options of what other jurisdictions are doing to reduce emissions. It's come to my attention that some other places are using low NOx appliance standards to kind of reach some goals. Is that on your radar, and what can we learn more about?
Yeah, I don't have lessons at this point, but yes, we are currently doing that research. We are talking to people and we are tracking that as part of sort of getting ready for that discussion. I think where kind of cities seem to be right now is everybody's sort of figuring out what is happening post Berkeley and with the decision to not take it up on bonk. And so kind of we're doing that research right now just to understand what people are doing and just see what the different mechanisms are that are being sort of tested and evaluated and considered out there.
Excellent.
Good.
Thank you so much for
Yep.
your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Matt and then Emily.
Thank you. What an awesome presentation, and I really appreciate the rubric and the matrix laid out. Thank you so much. I've got a few things that jump out. In attachment B, we see that bus and bike use are on a decline. It's not a rapid decline, nevertheless, it's a decline, sadly. And drive alone is on the increase. And yet the next slide indicates a significant spike in electric vehicle usage year after year. How much of a different tale would it tell if the drive alone was parsed out electric vehicle versus outmoded fossil fuel vehicle?
I would love to have that data. We don't have it right now. I think tracking transportation by mode is really challenging. I think the transportation planners from the city would talk about that. I think part of what we're doing for inventory work is to try and find different ways in which we can collect and use data to make decisions. And that's one of those split by mode that I think would be really helpful. I think right now we don't have a good answer for that, but I think it'd be interesting to understand what we can do. So for example, Google has tools where they can basically track your cell phone data and based on how fast you're moving between towers, figure out if you're walking, biking, riding a bike, or being in a car. What it can't differentiate is whether you're in a gas car or an EV. And so that's kind of the next layer of data to figure out how we could differentiate between those two to figure out what the impact of the uptake in EVs is on our gas consumption.
Slightly Orwellian yet valuable.
Yeah.
I turned off my.
Yeah, well, to get on the topic of parsing out data and on the topic of bringing in the business community, when I look on the slide presentations, slide 3, we have buildings, both commercial and industrial, lumped together at 19% sector-based emissions, recognizing that there are folks in the commercial sector and folks in government who, we're operating out of a LEED certified building as we speak, who are doing the right thing. What tale is told, or what could I learn if that piece of the pie, that 19%, was split between like institutions of higher education or schools and government, commercial, and industrial?
In terms of a breakdown,
Yeah,
amongst those things, I don't have that math in front of me. I guess roughly, I'm guessing institutions, including government buildings, is probably going to be 10 to 15% of that. Commercial is probably going to be about 60% of that, and then industrial is going to be whatever the balance is, another 15%. So industrial, we have basically, we have a lot of wood products manufacturing in this town, really important, great jobs for us. They are probably the biggest impact in Eugene from industrial. For commercial, it's really wide. There's it's across the board. And so for institutions, it's probably 15% on that in terms of city, county, colleges.
Okay.
We can get that math, do that math. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm guessing roughly that's probably the breakdown.
I'd love to learn more about that breakdown. And in the buildings piece, the residential, the 11%, I'd love to learn about apartments or condos versus single family homes. I'd like to learn the residential breakdown too.
Okay.
Renters or homes built before a certain time or after a certain time.
And a lot of that's in the decarbonization report that the Good Company did for the city last year.
Point taken. Yeah. And appreciate and applaud that good company work. Thank you. I'll go back and review. Thank you. We can shift to attachment B, page 44, the tree canopy piece. I do see we're on a decline in regards to trees planted, but there are other municipalities that have imposed penalties for trees removed. And I wonder if we have a goal of a 30% tree canopy coverage, and the tree canopy is essentially our public right of way, right? It's not residential, or is it all of the above?
It covers the entire canopy. I mean, the city tracks it both in the right of way and on city owned and controlled properties, but also from a community as a whole. So we track it with both numbers.
So I wonder if there is a willingness to explore policy that would mirror Portland in regards to assessing a fine up to $1,000 per tree removed or $100 per inch in diameter.
I think that would be a discussion for our tree staff. I don't think I'm prepared for that. I think, as a conversation related to the update to the tree code might be where that would be a conversation to have for that.
Thank you.
Counselor Keating, I just want to add for trees in the right of way, there actually is already a mechanism by which people are charged if they remove a tree without permit. So that is one thing. It's a little different than what you're saying, but there is some code ready in place around the right of way and in trees, loss of trees.
Good. All right, Emily and then Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and the incredible work this is. I'm just amazed. I remember when we got the CAP 2.0 and it was so thick and going through all of the different actions and just feeling like that was going to take 10 years to get them all going, and to see that we have such a large percentage ongoing and completed is surprising to me. I mean, I'm really glad about it, but we haven't checked in about so many, there's over 100 things and there's a lot we haven't checked in on since we go with the big ones. So I just found that reassuring that, yeah, we didn't have staff for a while and things were kind of quiet and COVID. So that just feels really good. I'm going to put it with my big notebook. So when people ask me, I can find out, because people do want to know all the time, what are you doing? Is it making a difference? And they're going to say, not enough difference, which we know, but those ongoing progress are going to add up. And as all along, there may be new technology coming that will save us. And I'll be really interested to see the next year or two, the reports as we recover from COVID, and some of the ongoing things have had an effect. And the trees, I think from the storm, we only know about the trees on public land. So that doesn't include your trees, Wendy. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mike and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned some of our successes coming from the purchase of carbon credits. In this most recent budget year, what did the city spend doing that?
It was about $50,000 fiscal year.
And that money went where?
The most recent offsets that we purchased went to a mix of projects. And so one was a forestry project in the Pacific Northwest up in Washington. Another was a methane capture project that is in Oregon. And the last one was a refrigerant destruction project that's based in California. So replacing refrigerants with more carbon friendly options.
But all of that is money that left the community, right?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. And thank you for the report that you gave me. It's always amazing how much two people that you guys do. I'm always very impressed with that. For me, the CAP 2.0 really, it's about hope. It's about acknowledging that all of us in the city of today have a responsibility for creating the city of the future. So I really enjoy these moments where we can kind of come together and talk about what we've done and what we have yet to do, whether that's always sometimes good news and sometimes bad news or a mix. Today, I really appreciate this time where we can do this. I don't have a ton of questions. Like I said, the report is excellent and answered all of my questions. I do appreciate some of the questions that were asked today. Since Matt asked, though, I will let you know what my thoughts are about charging for trees. I think people sometimes have to remove a tree for a lot of different reasons. I know folks who have removed them for gardening, which I think is a net benefit to our community. So I would not be in favor of charging folks. But I do like the idea of thinking outside the box, how people can participate in the work that we're doing, so that it's not just always seeing what the city or seeing what partners are doing, but what they can particularly do themselves. And I know you guys look for those opportunities as well, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I know Alan wants a second round, but I just want to jump in for a second. One of the things that strikes me about this is that that I often say about this work, and it's really clear looking at the matrix, is how incremental this work is, that we do lots of little pieces in lots of different directions. And so sometimes it's hard to sort of have that big thermometer that says we're making a huge amount of progress. I guess as we go forward and as we think about what we can talk about in later in the summer, when you come back, is sort of thinking about both how we build momentum, how the work, what aspects of this work give us some momentum that will help us move forward, and also the engagement that you're doing around community willingness. Because I think even though if the individual household reduces their greenhouse gas emissions, it may not change baseline because our population is growing, but we would be much worse off if they weren't doing that. So we would be slipping farther behind. So I think that this sense of hope and that people's actions actually make a difference, and sort of the extent to which we can understand that what are those triggers that enable people to do what we really want them to do, right? In terms of we have a lot of thoughts around how we get people out of their cars. We have, I think, fewer refined thoughts about about residential building decarbonization and what that looks like. And it feels like there are opportunities coming down with heat pumps, but probably not enough in terms of the scale of it. So I'll be really interested in that. How do we look at sort of community willingness? Where is their willingness? Where can we identify sort of those triggers where we have some momentum, and sort of in terms of having a staff, where is your time best directed as we're doing that work? Feels like it's really important. And then I just wanted to ask maybe a quick question, because you went over it pretty quickly, Ian, around the partners, but I know there's been a lot more work going back to some of those bigger partners, that some of whom were in our original climate collaborative. And I don't know if you want to just speak to that just a little bit more.
Sure. So the Eugene Climate Collaborative was kind of the foundation of CAP 2.0, and it was, large, institutional stakeholders in the city who could pull levers to help accomplish our climate goals. And I think with COVID and with staffing turnover, that kind of went away. And I think what we've tried to do is to rebuild those relationships and begin small, but to have these conversations to understand what are our mutual goals, what are we trying to do, how can we partner to identify funding opportunities, develop programs, have conversations. And I think that continues to grow. I think initially we were focusing these conversations on what are the grant opportunities that we can partner on. The Resilience Hub thing I talked about came out of these conversations. Others have come out of this as well. So I think we're starting, and it's not a full conversation yet, but we're beginning this conversation, inviting new people continually to this conversation to grow kind of this group again. And then think about kind of, at some point we'll be too big to have one conversation, and we'll probably follow a similar model where we'll break into other types of subtopics based on people's interest or where their action is, as a way to just have kind of this conversation, probably even bigger than we were talking about previously. I think we're really focusing like on a regional level now, even more so than Eugene, just understanding that there are a lot of cross-boundary problems that don't stop at the Eugene sort of line. And so how can we pool resources and basically identify those opportunities on a much larger scale, really initially on funding, but beyond that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. That just feels like incredibly powerful work. And that was the premise of the CAP to begin with, which is that there would be these larger agency partners that we could do more collectively than if we each had sort of separate, more siloed activity. So I just really, I applaud that effort, and I'm really glad that that's sort of come back. All right, Alan, did you want a second round?
Please. Yeah, that collaboration I think is critical. And for your benefit, Mike, it's silver buckshot, not silver bullet. There's 115 of these actions, and they're all smaller. Couldn't get a work session without saying that. And to your point about offsets, I agree to some degree that, and that's why I've recommended to the Sustainability Commission, I think when they came here and did their work plan, that they work on a project to do local offset projects. Right now, we don't have the ability to just hone in on projects here in Eugene only. So that would be something I think we should really focus in on for Sustainability Commission. My big question for you guys is, we have hundreds of millions of dollars coming in from the Biden administration for energy efficiency, renewable energy, resiliency, greenhouse gas emission reduction projects. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity because this isn't going to come our way again. And I'm wondering about the plan for that. There are, for example, there's $300 to $600 billion worth of tax credits that people can get access to. Everybody here can get a 30% instant tax credit for their putting in a heat pump or doing energy efficiency in their house or their business. Plus the incentives that you get from the state and the local and the feds. So it really makes it sometimes really beneficial economically. And then there's grants and rebates for solar and heat pumps and grid resilience and energy efficiency, weatherization of homes and businesses, as well as renewable energy project funding. So my question is, what are we doing to maximize our share of that that's coming our way to Oregon? And do we have a specific plan? And if we do, what's in it?
Sure. So a lot to unpack there. We don't have a plan written down, but we do have a plan. We have an approach, and there's probably 4 prongs right now that I can think of. I think one is, again, through these partnerships, trying to identify, mostly because one, EPA and DOE seem to require having to do these larger projects. They want us to partner, whether it's with community-based organizations or with other states, other cities. So that's part of it, and using that as a way to identify and go after grants. And again, it's competitive, but we're trying to put our best foot forward for that. So that's one pathway. I think the second I talked about a little bit is kind of this outreach and communication. And it's fundamentally just raising awareness, making sure that people are aware of these things, whether it's through the tax code, whether it's from ETO or from EWEB, programs from EWEB or Northwest Natural that can participate in. Again, it's making sure they're aware of that. I think the third phase is something I've talked about a couple times with council, and we continue to have conversations, is I think in parallel to what the state is doing, but not so much from a website perspective, is bringing on board some type of program manager or navigator to basically be a resource for people to go to, so that they can understand all the different things that they can take advantage of. I think what we've learned from our engagement in talking to landlords and people who would be interested in this is that they get overwhelmed by this process, and they get into this and there's paperwork. And if you do one thing, you can't take advantage of another, and it becomes really complicated. And if you don't do this for your job, it's overwhelming. And I think if we want to make sure that people take advantage of as much of this as possible, is to have this program manager role that can help people get through this process, do the paperwork, help them think about the opportunities, understand, well, if you do this, you can't take advantage of this, or here's the right sequence that you need to do this to take advantage of, weatherization incentives first, and then, energy efficiency incentives. So it's that as well. And then I think the fourth thing is really trying to just understand some of the conditions. So for example, the State Department of Energy is currently developing a program for 2 different home energy rebate programs funded through IRA money. And we're actually, staff are part of a work group as they develop this program, which is really helpful because we have good insight on this program. But we also understand that when you look at, it's a big pot of money. It's the largest investment in climate that's ever happened, but it's still probably only covering 1% of the need. And so I think the idea is it's a start, we're laying a foundation, but I think it's instructive to think about that. So if you look at one program in particular, it was basically a $9 billion federal program. It was allocated based on formula. So it's based on population. Oregon got about 115 million, and they're going to be creating 2 rebates programs from that. Odo did an analysis a year ago, or not, last fall, where they've estimated that about 13,000 housing units would be able to take advantage of this. We have 1.7 million in the state. So we're not even covering 1% of our population. So again, it's trying to position ourselves to take advantage of this, but also making sure we understand what the rules are, how to take advantage of it. And a lot of that just takes time to understand what's there. And sort of the idea of a program manager is to help somebody sort of navigate that space better, understand that space. So that feels like it's going to be a pretty big linchpin. I think the other thing we're hearing in these engagement, conversations we're having, particularly with the business community, is there's an appetite for this from the commercial sector as well. They don't have as many incentives. There's different things to take advantage of, but there's appetite for this type of service there also. And so we're looking at how can we provide that as an additional thing, in addition to the residential, which is really where a lot of the federal money is.
Yeah, thanks. I think you should put it in writing, because that was very good, by the way.
Watch the recording.
Yes, and then write it down. And then put it on your website. I noticed outreach and communication, I think, is a very critical component of it, but I couldn't find anything about any of that stuff you just talked about on our website when I did a search. So that'd be a great place to do that. And the program manager navigator is a really good idea. I know Oregon Department of Energy has a one-stop shop where you can call in and they'll tell you if you buy utility, what programs you can have access to. So it helps people navigate that morass of different programs. I mean, if you're laser focused, it's relatively easy, but if you don't know anything, there's a lot and it's hard to navigate that. So yeah, I would like to see a plan on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to give you, Matt, I know you want a second round, and then we need to wrap this up because we do have another topic and we do need to talk about it.
I'll go quickly, Mayor.
Okay.
Councilor Zelenka, who brought up the tax credit piece, and we live 24 years into the 21st century. There are tax credits and deductions for families who have children. Great. But it begs the question why there are not similar tax credits for families who adopt animals, who adopt pets. Certainly a conversation that I would love to explore, but not necessarily relevant to the conversation at hand. Buses on attachment B, I mentioned earlier, are on decline. As a transportation method, I wonder in cities like Corvallis and Kansas City, Akron and Boston, just to name a few, where there are free fare opportunities for residents to ride the bus, would that decline be an incline or an increase in ridership?
I think I would have to ask somebody and get back to you on that.
I think I know the answer, but I appreciate that. I would like to learn more. And that's a larger conversation I look forward to having with our LTD partners. And then finally, just a quick point of clarification on the tree canopy piece, Councilor Ye, that those fines that I alluded to, it's my understanding, are only triggered if one doesn't submit the proper paperwork or there's a process by which you indicate why. And then it's punitive if you don't go through that process.
Okay. Oh, with that, what a note to end on. Punitive. Okay. Let's hope not. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really, really interesting work and exhaustive. And we really just appreciate how thorough your responses are. And thank you. We look forward to the next conversation.
Thanks, Mayor and Council.
And we have 35 minutes, so hopefully we can have a good conversation on the next item. Thank you.
We do or don't?
Hey, Assistant City Manager, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So pleased to have Craig Carnegie, our Parks and Open Space Director, and Carolyn Burke, our Parks Planning Manager, with us tonight to talk about the proposed regional pickleball facility and an analysis of eligibility for the SDC project list, potential impacts, and a proposed resolution for consideration that's in your packet. And with that, I will hand it off to Craig.
All right, thank you. Hello, Mayor, Council, City Manager. My name is Craig Carnegie. I'm the Parks and Open Space Division Manager, and I'm here with Carolyn Burke, our Parks and Natural Resources Planning Manager. We've got a brief presentation for you tonight in response to a council motion back in January requesting information about whether a regional pickleball facility is eligible to receive funds from Parks and Recreation System development charges, what the impacts of adding this project to the SDC project list would be on other projects currently funded with SDCs, and provide an option for council action to add this project to the SDC project list. As you know, the city received a request from the Emerald Valley Pickleball Club to contribute $750,000 towards development of 24 lighted pickleball courts, including 10 covered courts on LCC's Lane Community College's main campus off 30th Avenue. The facility would be operated by Emerald Valley Pickleball Club and open to the public. The club is hoping to start development of this facility sometime in 2025. Pickleball has seen rapid growth and participation in our region over the last decade. Despite the Parks Division's efforts to add more courts throughout the system, with almost $300,000 already invested, we have not been able to keep up with the demand. A regional pickleball facility would significantly help alleviate the pressure to build more courts and other parks throughout Eugene. The proposed regional pickleball facility project does meet eligibility for using SDC funds due to the increase it would have on adding recreational amenities for Eugene residents. In order to use these funds, this facility would need to ensure public access and be officially added to the Parks SDC priority list through council action. Simply adding this project to the SDC project list today would have no impact to Parks SDC methodology or fee structure, and no immediate impact on projects currently budgeted to use SDCs. All current projects on the SDC priority list would remain on the list. Any impacts to other projects would depend on when the $750,000 for pickleball is actually allocated. The allocation of these funds would require an additional step, a separate council budget action. And this slide shows current projects scheduled to be completed using SDC funds through 2027. If funds for pickleball facility were allocated within this time frame, then funds would likely need to be found within the existing budgets of one or more of these projects, which means those projects would either be delayed until additional SDCs were collected over the years, and or the scope of those projects might need to be scaled back to reduce costs, such as reducing or eliminating some. A delay in a project schedule would also mean cost increases for that project due to inflation. Several of these projects are slated to begin construction this summer or next. The projects most likely to be impacted if funding for pickleball were allocated before 2027 would be Golden Garden Sports Complex and West Bank and Ferndale neighborhood parks. And with that, to recap, basically the regional pickleball facility project can be placed on the project priority list today with no impact to other SDC funded projects, and you have the motion in your packet to do so. The timing for disbursement of the $750,000 to the club will require council budget action along with a signed agreement between responsible parties describing public access to the facility executed prior to the delivery of any funds. And as you probably saw in your packet, the city manager's recommendation does support adding the regional pickleball facility to the SDC project list as long as timing of funding remains flexible to minimize impacts to existing priority projects. That's the end.
That's pretty discreet. Thank you very much. So are there questions, Emily and Randy?
I'm concerned about the other parks. You said it wouldn't have any impact, but you also said it would delay or decrease the projects. So which is it?
Just adding this project to the priority list would not have an impact. It's when the funds are actually allocated, they're dispersed to the club, that we would have to make a determination in terms of timing, which of these projects might be impacted. Does that make sense? So adding it to the eligibility list doesn't have the impact.
But doing it does.
It's the actual additional budget. It's the actual additional budget action of allocating that fund and whenever that time is.
Well, that's concerning to me. Whenever that time is pretty unknown and what funds will replace it. I think the pickleball court idea is great. It will help a lot of people, but not everybody. You have to get up to Lane County Lane Community College. It's like another project we're thinking about, it wouldn't be owned by the city. I'm in favor of the project, but I'm very concerned about just adding it to the list and things that have already been improved. And I would assume some people are looking forward to having happen might now be impacted for the sake of pickleball. So thank you.
Okay, Randy and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Craig, for the presentation. I like the idea of creating opportunities to get people out of their houses and moving. And I think this is a good project, but I'm wondering who all is contributing to this. Obviously, the city of Eugene's been asked, LCC has been asked. Who are the other participants?
The other agencies that I'm aware of are Lane County, and they have $500,000 in their recently passed levy that is going towards this project. I'm not aware of any other agencies or organizations or individuals, but I mean, I know they're actively out there fundraising.
So nothing from Springfield?
As far as I know, I do not know that. I only know of Lane County for sure.
Very good. Okay.
I do have I travel Lane County has, I think they've dedicated $50,000 to it.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Alan and then Mike.
Yeah, the reason I brought this forward is because pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in the country, actually, and here in particular. I mean, there's a great group of very dedicated people working on this project. It's a $5 million plus project over at LCC. It has the potential to be an economic development draw for pickleball tournaments. So I think that's great. That's why Travel Lane County is donating $50,000 to this. So they see that benefit as well. And the other, pickleball is noisy and can be annoying, and having it be out at LCC is a great place to put it over there. It's not around a lot of people. And so I think that's another big plus. And just for all the people watching at home, parks SDCs cannot be used on anything but park type facilities. Can't be used for housing or homelessness or any other deficit reduction. It has to be used on park facilities like this project. So there's a very limited way that these monies can be spent. For me, this is a high priority project, and I would like to see this move up in the queue. I'm not sure, but I think 2026 is their target date for construction. That's probably when they need it. I think these plans are great. Plans also need to be flexible and adapt to new things. And this wasn't in the plan. Now it is. And I think we have to fit it in where it should be placed in the queue and not be just beholden to the things that we thought about in the past. So for me, it's high priority. I would move it up in the queue.
All right, Mike, and then Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say, as far as the pickleball plan goes, I'm fine with using SDCs this way. I think it's an admirable way to think about how to take care of this, and will be used in the community. I'm fine with it. And although I probably shouldn't go down this road, as long as Emily's at the table here, I kind of want to ask this question, just to remind maybe my younger colleagues who don't know this. Am I correct in assuming that the parks project list is still an aspirational list? Am I correct in that? It's
No.
not or has it been adopted as part of plan?
You did adopt a new project list when you last revisited your methodologies, and the SDCs that are expected to be raised are intended to fund each item on that
I'm
list.
talking about the Metro plan and the parks list that got remanded.
Oh, that also has been replaced and updated.
That's what I want.
With,
Okay.
and your staff are much more able.
We are operating under a Metro plan that has the actual project. It's not an aspirational list, correct?
What happened is the parks plans never needed to be part of the Metro plan. And so they are not part of the Metro plan. We bifurcated them from that land use process, and you adopted it as not a land use plan. So it's not in the Metro plan, but it is adopted and valid.
So it was part of the 2018 Parks and Recreation System Plan that actually allowed us to generate this list and create the priority list through that. And that was adopted by council, the list.
Thank you very much for humoring me. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, Lindsay and then Matt.
Thank you. I want to expand on what you were just talking about. How did we get to this list, and what were the equitable measures to choose where the projects land? And, you know, I look into kind of some of my neighborhoods and see a bit of a void in some of these projects. And I think, you know, a really vibrant neighborhood is one that has parks and community centers and, you know, places for people to gather. And I look at Train Song and a lot of the Whitaker where people actually live, and I don't see a lot of projects for those people. And I think those places bear such a large brunt of our homeless, you know, issues and services and just hardships. And I think we should be really, you know, bringing more and more resources, and, you know, to combat that. So I'm just interested in how that process works. Is it like this, where we just, you know, come up with a project and and vote for it, or is it a more extensive process?
Well, as Craig stated, the STC project list is based on the 2018 Parks and Recreation System Plan. So there is a much broader list of projects that are within that system plan. And we did many years of outreach to the community and really did try to balance and understand what the unique needs are of each of the different neighborhoods and districts that we're working in. And I think overall it is a very well-rounded plan. From there, then we looked at how we're going to implement the plan. And part of that solution is the bond measure. And so we put together a project list that I think did really try to focus on some of the underserved areas. So a lot of the projects you see in the bond measure are about building new parks in underserved areas. But then the other piece is SDCs, and only certain types of projects can be funded with SDCs. They have to be capacity enhancing. We can't spend SDC improvement dollars on an existing park renovation or something like that. So it has to be expanding capacity for new population growth. The other thing is we can only use projects that were going to be funded within the first 20 years of the plan. So priority 1 and 2 projects. So if you're just looking at the SDC project plan, you're only seeing a slice of the projects, and would love to share with you the broader kind of suite of projects that we have throughout the whole city, because I do think there's a lot of equity shown there. And the bond measure really did try to emphasize that as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that information and explanation. I wasn't here in 2018 to make an influence on that. And that being said, I'm very supportive of this project moving forward. I love pickleball. My kids and I love to play pickleball. It's such a wonderful intergenerational sport, and such an accessible sport that can be played by anyone. I love the public health aspect and the community building aspect. So I will support bringing this into the project list today, but I would want more information on how the impacts would play in bringing it up into the queue a little earlier. So I appreciate you.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and then Greg.
The only way pickleball is going to be more popular is if it features Ben Stiller or Will Ferrell in the movie Pickleball, the film coming to a theater near you. I was dubious at first and was invited by constituents to play pickleball. I rode my e-bike, played pickleball, and then went and had an IPA. And if that's not the most Pacific Northwest thing that you can now do, and you haven't lived it unless you've played pickleball and got beat by our friend Alicia Hayes. So I am, like Councilor Zelenka, ecstatic about this project. So I would love to see it come to fruition and look forward to being a partner to, as was pointed out, help get folks moving. The current pickleball facilities are a little overcrowded. I don't know if there's a way to have it be a moneymaker other than obviously the tourism piece, which is obviously why Travel Lane County is interested, because if it is a world-class pickleball facility, people will come from all over, or when they come to stay here, they will want to play pickleball at the proposed LCC Titan pickleball court, whatever it'll be called. But I wonder if, like the library, where there's a library card for Eugene residents, if there's a fast pass or a pickleball card for Eugene residents, since Eugene is kind of helping foot the bill.
We don't have that type of detail in terms of that specific access. What we're mostly concerned about is just making sure that there is public access. And in terms of cards or anything along those lines, that would be something that would evolve with the conversation. But yeah, our first priority would just be make sure that Eugene residents have public access to use these facilities.
Well, if there's a pickleball punch card coming soon, then
Be a pickle pass.
Pickle pass. I like that, Councilor Zelenka. I love the alliteration. Look, it's a popular exercise, a popular sport, from young to old and everyone in between. Like I said, I was dubious at first, but once you get on out in the court, it's pretty contagious in all the best of ways. So I'm a strong yay.
All right, Greg, and then Emily.
Well, I'll ditto that for Counselor Keating on this one. I think that this is a prudent investment for our community. I also am aware that there's been a private commitment of another $2.5 million to be raised, for this facility. And there will be an ask of the city of Springfield to put in some resources and some dollars to this facility. Because again, we need to have the facilities if we're going to attract the kind of tournaments and the tourism business that we are now losing to other parts of Oregon. Medford, the Portland metro area, of course, even Salem, we have lost a lot of, dollars that would come into our community that would, enhance our tax base. And probably the best way to do it is probably the lowest impact in terms of an industrial or, carbon footprint kind of impact, which except for the transportation piece of it, tourism dollars are relatively clean dollars. And so, this kind of facility will attract people from not just regionally, but from all over the country to, come to Eugene, spend their dollars and resources here, and boost our economy. So, you got a full-blown enthusiastic yes from me.
Okay, Emily, a second round?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't see Jennifer.
That's
I-
okay.
Let Jennifer have her first.
I need to be more. Okay,
Exuberant.
yeah, something. So I will admit that pickleball is not my thing. However, I think this is a great project. It supports the needs of locals, but also has a great economic benefit of bringing in players from other areas that can spend money in our pubs and stay in our hotels and all the things. So I think it's a great project. And I will support today adding the project to the SDC eligibility list. But I also think about our triple bottom line. And there are many projects throughout our city that don't currently, Parks and Open Space, that don't currently have identified funding, that didn't make it on the list. And these communities, as Lindsay was pointing out, have been waiting a really long time too. And park space is not, in my view, open space is not a want, it's not a luxury, it's something we should all have. So I do have, I am hesitant to push something that has not been waiting very long, that is a very new want in our community, to the front of the line over projects on this list that I think are very important to our community. So obviously we're gonna have to come back and this is gonna be a second conversation. And I just think there's gonna have to be a pretty big justification for jumping the line for me, because right now it would be a no if we were voting today. So I just wanted to share that with you. So when you come back, you're aware of at least where I stand on this. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And now Emily, second round, and Alan.
Thank you. So they're thinking it's gonna cost $5 million to build this. And they're fundraising it from whom besides cities and the travel in the county? There's a big gap left.
I think that there are fundraising from all of their participants and anyone and everyone that would contribute to the project.
So I'm just thinking about our baseball stadium, if they'll have to find all the rest of the funding before they come to us for SDCs, even if we've put them on the list. I mean, we're not gonna give them SDCs if they haven't figured out the rest of how they're gonna pay for it. There's 5 million, substantial amount of money, and they're not there yet. Okay, thank you very much, and one of these days I'm gonna try it out.
Okay, Alan.
Jennifer, I think the justification for putting this on the list and moving it up is that it has momentum and it has funding. And this is just a very small part, but necessary part of making this bigger project go. Our contribution, 10–15% of the total cost, it makes it move up in the queue for me. The ones that are, if there's a bunch of people interested in that and they want to get it going, let's get them motivated by an example to have them come up with money. The $2.5 million private investment, the same, I think a lot of the same people that we didn't think would contribute money to the Y or to the Civic Stadium rebuild, and all those projects are either in place or in coming to fruition. And I think there is money in the community to be had for this, and I think there's a really good likelihood that they'll come up with it. They have to come up with a plan before we do ours. Same with the county, and if they ask the city of Springfield, same thing. But I think that's the fact that there's so many people working on it that make it happen.
All right. Yeah.
Just really quick, I want to just make sure you know, a bunch of people who have money who are interested is not justification for me. Like in my neighborhood, one of the parks that is undeveloped is also in the poorest section of my community, right? They're not going to galvanize around and get $5 million to do a park, right? It's not going to happen. Many of them work and have families and sometimes multiple jobs. They don't even have time to come to a council meeting. And I think it's the same for sections of our community, as you guys know, like Bethel or Trainsong. Like they're not going to have an upspring of people coming together to get something like this. It's just not going to happen. It's unrealistic for us to expect that. So the justification has to be something better than that for me.
So before I ask Matt to put a motion on the table, I want to actually chime in on Jennifer's comment, because I think this is a great facility. I think it'll be a great asset to the community. I'm delighted they want to do it. I'm glad that most of it, they're going to fundraise in other ways and they're not coming to the city for a bigger price tag. The devil's going to be in the details, I think, in terms of how I see this, because there are definitely projects on this list that I would not be comfortable saying they're going to lose their funding in favor of this pickleball. So it's the next conversation that we have, and what project is going to be impacted and how is it going to be impacted. That's, for me, is going to be really the critical conversation. And I know you're going to be thoughtful about that and how you bring that forward, but it's a little bit of for me, to the pickleball advocates, yes, we love it. It's great, but it's not I'm not really with Alan that it's better than anything else that is out there, or more deserving than anything else that's out there. I'd really want to know what the impact is going to be on specific projects. So, and yeah, one more round, Emily.
Thank you. Just really quickly, maybe their fundraising will be so great they won't need our SDC.
Right, there you
go. Go team. And going back to slide 2, there's a very long shade structure roof, and tying our two topics together. I hope that will be all solar panels. Thank you.
It looks like it. Not rendering. Okay, are you ready to put a motion on the table?
My understanding, those already exist out there today.
Oh, cool.
Move to adopt the resolution at attachment A to the AIS to amend the Parks and Recreation SDC project plan to include the regional pickleball project.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there we go. Thank you very much for making that really clear and good conversation. And with that, we're adjourned until 7:30.